So how much faster would a pro go in your racing car? Why? What is it that they are doing differently? How can you use data to understand that? And then how can you actually translate that back to using data when you don't have a pro in your own car? So earlier in the year, Scott Mansell, 750 Motor Club, and myself came together to put together this video on the true cost of racing. It's pretty popular. It's had over 140,000 views so far. You can grab it, you can watch it at the link below on the site. I shook down and tested the car on the Friday, and then Scott raced it on the weekend. So what was interesting was that we suddenly had a data set from an amateur, myself, and a professional driver in the same car. So I thought it would be really interesting to do a head-to-head and to take the data and see where, if we had this information, it's unusual to get it, how can we use that to understand and inform some of the theories and some of the practices around data analysis. We'll create this little head-to-head and we'll take you through it so you can see what is it that Scott is doing differently to me, and then how you can use those same techniques with your own data analysis. Just quickly, I'm Samir Abid, founder of Your Data Driven. I'm an engineer, vehicle dynamics engineer. I spent the first part of my career working for people at Aston Martin, Multimatic, Jaguar Land Rover, designing suspension and steering systems for road and racing cars. The more recent part of my career, I've actually spent in the world of sport and Olympic sport, and I've been helping those teams use data to make decisions. These days, I can be found back in the paddock, running the site, Your Data Driven. I've got a popular podcast that you might enjoy where I interview the best of the best in motorsport to get their views on what we can learn from professional motorsport and bring that back into club racing. There's some great guests on there, so I really recommend you take a listen to what they have to say. So this event took place at Snetterton, and what I want to do is present two little things for you. An overall comparison of what Scott did versus me, and then just an analysis of one corner so we can start to dig into the detail of what the data can tell you so that we can really form a plan for how to improve next time out. Because that's ultimately what we want to do, more systematically and precisely lower our lap times. So here we go, let's get this out of the way. The fastest laps for the two drivers. One was red, one was blue. Who was it? There's only 1.3 seconds between them, so that's not too bad. Yeah, there's no real doubt. Scott was quicker than me, and that's it. The interesting thing though was, what was it that made him quicker? Why was he quicker? So that's what we want to find out, and that's what we're going to look at. So first, the overall. This is the friction circle. The way in which this chart works is that feet up and down, hands left and right. And you can see there's a shape. It's if you squint a bit, there's a bit of an oval shape to it. And even if you don't know anything else, you just compare it to my data, you can see there's some differences there. And so before we go any further, you can see, okay, already there's some differences in the way in which these two drivers are using the grip. And if you, in fact, overlay one on top of the other, so there's Scott's in the blue, you can see he's using maybe a little bit more brakes, and he, on a couple of places, he seems to be using a little bit more steering. Interesting, I seem to be using a little bit more, getting some better acceleration in a couple of places. So already there's some thoughts there on like, okay, what is it that we can learn from this overall? But what it's really showing you is that Scott, because his is much more on the edge more of the time, he's much more consistent than me. So Scott is more consistent, and in general, he's using more of the grip. So that's how you'd summarize this up. So he's using more grip more consistently. But how is he doing that? So let's have a look at this corner analysis. So here we go. I'm just going to look at turn one at Snetterton. We could just zoom in and just see exactly what's going on there. Now, if you're not familiar with turn one, here is my onboard video from my car on this fast lap. Have a look as I go through the corner at the steering, and you'll see a slight correction halfway through. See if you can spot that, because it's really important, because it's something we'll see in the data in a minute. You'll see it. So that's going through the corner. So it did look pretty smooth, to be honest with you. It didn't look too bad. Let's see actually what happened. So back to our overview. So the difference between that little section was 0.4 of a second. So Scott was 13.99 seconds to go from the start line round to that point where I finished the video, and I was 14.34. So that's quite a big difference in one corner. So what was going on, and why was he able to pull out so much time in just the one corner? So here is the speed trace. That's the top one. And so again, Scott's the blue and I'm the red, and you can immediately see that he is quicker. So the higher up, that speed on that side, and we've got distance along the bottom. And you can immediately see he is quicker than me, and it's immediately obvious that I am slowing down more than he is, slowing down later than he is. And so already you can say that would explain the difference. And below, you've got the time difference, and this is the time delta T, his lap time versus my lap time through this section. And you can see this is where he is gaining his 0.4 of a second. And it's all lined up, so you can actually see that he's gaining that mainly on the way in to the corner, mainly on the entry. And that kind of correlates with what you can see from the speed trace. Two other things you can look at is the steering and the brakes. So I've taken that from that donut chart, I've stretched those out, and now they're on our elongated chart with distance. And so the first one is the steering. You can actually see that both of us are turning in at about the same time. He seems to be turning in maybe a little bit more than me, but not too much. And so if you look at that, my red line here, so going through into there, that's just me sort of turning into the thing. And see this little dip there? That is what we saw in the video. That's the little correction. So I'm still turning, but just had a little moment. And then pretty smooth coming out the other end. And so he is turning about the same time as me, turning a bit more. So maybe taking a slightly tighter line, but our lines are very similar. And then he's sort of doing a little bit more with the wheel through the corner, and then he's exiting. The line is pretty similar. So where's the difference? Well, we've already seen it alluded to in the speed trace, but here we go. It's in the braking trace. Above the line is going faster, below the line is slowing down. And here you can see that I start braking around here, and then about 50, 60 meters later, he has started braking. And so his peak is lower, and this gradient. So what that means is that I'm coming off the brake and I'm more progressive on the brakes. He's more aggressive and braking harder. That's what those two mean. That's why the shallow angle shows it was slow onto the brakes, and he's more hitting the brakes quite firmly. So that's quite interesting. What you can also see is that my red line goes above the line here. Can you see that? And it's above the line more than his at this point. And so that means I've actually got a better exit than he has. So I'm on the throttle, so I'm accelerating more than he is on the exit of the corner. Below this, you can see the combined G. So this is when you put the top two together. And what you're really looking for is a nice, smooth mountain over the top with steep sides and a smoothness at the top. And both of us have got this wobble at the top. His is a little bit more than mine, but he's going a lot quicker. But you can see his sides are more upright. So that's really quite interesting. In summary here, you can say we're steering on the same line, but he's braking later and harder than I am. So that's what's going on. But as a little bonus, I'm also going to add the throttle to this chart, because this is something we've got logged in the car as well. You can actually see something here. So if you just look at the blue line, so 100% is when it's at the top here, and you know where I've got the cursors at 94.84. Okay, so when it's down to 0, you've come off the throttle, and when you're coming back on, it's coming up, and it's a percentage. What's really interesting here is if you look at Scott's, is that he starts slowing down, yet you can see he's still pretty much full throttle. So what's going on? There's only two ways you can do that, is brake or steer. He's not steering, well, not very much, not enough to cause it to slow down that much. So he must be braking. So what he's also doing in this corner is he's started to touch the brakes before he's come off the throttle. So he's flat on the throttle, touching the brakes, and then coming off the throttle, and then going harder on the brakes. And that little transition with the left foot braking is enabling him to take much more control of the car, much less pitch into the corner, and carry a lot more speed through the corner. It's also helping him become more consistent and probably making him feel a lot more confident. So in summary, Scott is faster because he's carrying more speed into and through the corner. He's braking harder for less time. And by left foot braking, he's able to balance the car. That's all very well. So what do we do about it? So it's like the action plan is to brake 50 meters later And in practice, you can use the video to do that if you have video on board and it's synced up with your distance meter. So I'm currently braking here at the 3 board, the 3 strike board, and then about 50 meters later is the 2 board. So I'm braking at the 3, and in actual fact, I need to be braking past the 2. And that is the difference on the way in. Brake harder for less time. And then the stretch target for me personally, as a driver, and this is what you've got to do, is tailor your analysis to the driver, is to left foot brake. It's not something I do unless I'm in a go-kart, but this is something I could work on. And so if I can just do that little bit of overlap, that will give me more confidence and more ability to corner faster and more consistently. There we go. That's a snapshot of what you can do with analysis and a snapshot of what the difference is between a professional and an amateur driver. If you want to see the full lap analysed, I have a masterclass with an accompanying guide on how to do analysis if data analysis is not something you've done before. So you're very welcome to go and check those out. Be sure to sign up to the newsletter if it's something you're interested in, and check out the podcast on the blog. I'd love to hear from any of you guys when you're starting to look at data for the first time. So drop me a note at hello@yourdatadriven, and thank you very much for your time.